Oh god. May or may not know, I'm currently a nursing major. I gotta pass anatomy and physiology class with an A, so here we go. This is my summary going over the basics of the endocrine system. There's a lot, so hold on. Don't worry, this is for my sake anyways. So, the endocrine system is a system that regulates the human body. Think of growth, metabolism, balance, immune, and reproduction. Endo meaning inside, and crine meaning secretion, not to be mistaken with exocrine, which secretes stuff outside. Think of sweat. The endocrine system does all of that. It does it through hormones, which are secreted through the endocrine gland. They go through the bloodstream and attach to their specific target cells that have their specific receptor. Good to know, but hormones aren't like seeking missiles. They just float around the bloodstream until random contact with the specific target cells. Another good thing to know is the endocrine versus nervous system. The nervous system works fast and the distance is short, while the endocrine can move fast or slow and can travel short or long distances. Anyways, there are two different types of hormones, lipid-soluble hormones and water-soluble hormones. Let's start with the first. Lipid-soluble hormones. They bind to intercellular effectors, meaning they go straight inside the cell and diffuse through the plasma membrane. In order to do that, they are hydrophobic, means they don't like water, but allows them to pass through the plasma membrane. However, outside the cell, they need a transport protein to travel around. They go directly inside to a receptor in the cytoplasm and then go to the nucleus for gene expression. There are a lot of examples of lipid-soluble hormones, the most important being steroid hormones, and they derive from cholesterol. This includes thyroid hormones are amino acids that are also lipid solubles. This includes Don't worry, this is a lot, but will be covered a lot later. Water-soluble hormones. They're a bit different because they're hydrophilic, meaning they love water, but they cannot pass through the plasma membrane, so they attach through extracellular effectors. Basically, it goes hormones attached to the receptors, which activate a G protein, which go to an enzyme, which releases a second messenger, which then goes to the nucleus for gene expression. That's called a signaling cascade. This includes amino acids, except for the thyroid hormones, which I explained under lipid solubles. Now, how do your hormones work? Well, they have something called a half-life, which means how long it takes for a hormone concentration to drop by 50%. Short half-life means the effect will be shorter, like water-soluble hormones, as the kidney can remove them from circulation. Long half-life means the effect will last for longer, like lipid-soluble hormones, because the liver must break them down. More hormones means a stronger response. When there's too much hormones, cells do what's called a downregulation, meaning they have less receptors. When there's little to no hormones, cells will do an upregulation, meaning it will have more receptors to increase sensitivity. There are also three factors for the responsiveness of hormones: permissive effect, meaning they need each other for the full effect; synergist effect, impacting the same pathway to create a stronger effect; and antagonistic effect, which are the opposite of each other. Now that we're done with the easy semi-part, God, I hate anatomy. Now we have to talk about how secretion happens, what glands, blah blah blah. The hypothalamus and pituitary glands regulate all the body systems. The pituitary gland is considered the master gland. The hypothalamus is basically the gateway between the nervous system and the endocrine system. Now, let's dive into the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis, is split up into two parts: the posterior pituitary gland and the anterior pituitary gland. Now let's start with the posterior pituitary. Also known as the neurohypophysis, it does not make its own hormones. Remember that. The hormones come from the hypothalamus. Now, the posterior releases the oxytocin and the antidiuretic hormone. Now, oxytocin, OXY, is your love drug. Basically, anything that gets aroused. Now, it's regulated with a positive feedback loop. Positive feedback means it gets amplified, unlike negative feedback loop, which are most hormones. Oxytocin is an exception. It releases through the
paraventricular nucleus.
Examples being smooth muscle in your mammary glands, breasts, to release milk, not make milk, release them. And the uterus muscle, the myometrium, to contract during labor. Also, peeing contraction to release the funny stuff. Now, the second hormone, antidiuretic hormone, ADH, is basically increasing kidney water reabsorption, which means less urination, less peeing. Not being able to produce ADH is diabetic insipidus. It's regulated through the supraoptic nucleus, a negative feedback loop. It helps retain water and decrease water loss through sweating by contracting the arteries, increasing blood pressure, vasopressin. Now, onto the anterior pituitary gland. Also known as adenohypophysis, it makes its own hormones and releases them through the hypophyseal portal system. They help by either releasing or inhibiting hormones. These include hormones. These hormones. We'll talk about all of them, don't worry. These are beautiful stuff. Beautiful, beautiful. This is where it gets complicated. I cry. HPS axis, also known as the hypothalamic pituitary somotrophic axis, is basically focuses on the growth. It goes, hypothalamus releases growth hormone releasing hormones, GHRH. The GHRH activates somotrophs and the anterior somotrophs release the growth hormones, GH. GH alters metabolism in the body as a direct action. The indirect action as it causes the liver to release insulin-like growth factors, LGFS. The LGFS increases growth in the body tissue. These are the factors for regulating the HPS axis. Just understand it. There are also disorders to the HPS. Too much growth hormones in childhood could lead to
gigantism,
while in adulthood could lead to acromegaly. Too little growth hormones in childhood could lead to dwarfism, and in adulthood could lead to a ton of other deformities. Now, another one, the HPT axis, otherwise known as the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid. This regulates metabolism, num num. It goes, hypothalamus releases thyrotrophin releasing hormones, TRH. The TRH then activates the anterior pituitary thyrotrophs. The thyrotrophs release the thyroid stimulating hormones, TSH. The TSH causes the thyroid glands to release the thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. Now remember, iodine is required for the thyroxine production. They increase
metabolic
rate and growth. And also a reminder, even though thyroid hormones are amino acids, they are lipid solubles, not water solubles. There are also disorders of the HPT. Too much thyroid, also known as hyperthyroidism, could lead to Graves' disease. Too little thyroid hormones is known as hypothyroidism. In childhood, it could lead to congenital hyperthyroidism, and adulthood could lead to
myxedema.
The thyroid gland, using iodine, is able to produce thyroid hormones.
Tetroiodothyronine,
T4, which is less active than T3, and
triiodothyronine,
T3. I don't know how to pronounce any of these. It also has C cells. It produces calcitonin. It uses it by lowering the calcium blood and stimulates osteoblastic activities to build bone matrix. PTH does the opposite. Now, the thyroid gland also has the parathyroid glands. It secretes the parathyroid hormones, the PTH. It increases blood calcium levels, so the opposite of calcitonin. Anyways, the adrenal glands. They're located on top of the kidneys. In the adrenal medulla, epinephrine and norepinephrine are important. Now, the most important part, the outer cortex. Now, the top layer is
zona glomerulosa.
This one secretes the
mineralocorticoid,
a body water balanced by regulating salt levels. The most important one is
aldosterone.
It targets the kidney by increasing Na reabsorption and K secretion. It also increases blood volume and blood pressure. Renin angiotensin
Aldosterone.
RRA pathway. I don't really understand what this is. Low blood pressure means the kidney secretes renin. Renin activates angiotensin from the liver, splitting it into angiotensin 1. The lungs activate angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 targets blood vessels in the adrenal cortex by increasing vasoconstricting and stimulating
Aldosterone.
releases. To keep going, the second layer, the
Zona fasciculata.
it secretes
Glucocorticoids.
It allows us to respond to stress and blood glucose level. Cortisol is the main one. It targets the liver, adipose tissue, and muscles. It enhances stress response and increases blood glucose levels. This one ties with the HPA axis, otherwise known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which regulates stress. Basically, it goes hypothalamus releases corticotropin releasing hormones, CRH. CRH activates corticotrophs. Corticotrophs release
Adrenocorticotropic.
hormones, ACTH. This allows for the adrenal glands to release cortisol. I cry. Cortisol also alters the metabolic process and the epinephrine and norepinephrine from the automatic nervous system with the sympathetic response. Now, stress is a normal response. It has noxious stimuli. Short is good and protective, but long can be stressful and harmful by using too much cortisol. Now, HPA has disorders like too much cortisol, known as Cushing's disease, and too little cortisol, known as Addison's disease. Now, the bottom layer,
Zona reticularis.
it secretes
Gonadocorticoids.
weak androgens. It manages puberty and sex drives.
Androstenedione.
Is the main type. It can be converted to testosterone or estrone, a precursor to estrogen. The pancreas. It has endo and exocrine functions, but the main one is the endocrine one, the islets of Langerhans. There are 4 cells: alpha cells, which secrete glucagon, beta cells, which secrete insulin, delta cells, which secrete somatostatin, and F cells, which secrete pancreatic polypeptide. Now, glucagon and insulin are opposites, meaning glucagon releases blood sugar levels when are low, and insulin are released when blood sugar levels are high. Somatostatin decreases insulin and glycogen releases, and polypeptide decreases somatostatin releases. The disorder is
Diabetes mellitus.
having type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is autoimmune and does not make sufficient insulin, usually found in children. Type 2 is progressive, that causes insulin resistance. Some symptoms are polyphagia, polydipsia, polyuria, neuropathy, blurred vision, and weight loss. And finally, the pineal gland, composed of pineocytes and neuralgia, releases melatonin, releases during the night and blocked by UV lights during the day. It can also help set circadian rhythm. Low light daylight means sad. Glad, lots of daylight, something something. And finally, there are endocrine disruptors, which could block or mitigate hormone slop. The one thing you need to know is bisphenol A, BPA. And that's it. That's the endocrine. I'm not giving a summary. This was a lot to go through. And I'm tired. And I got like 3 more modules to go through. So I hope you enjoy.